I have been very lucky to kayak a lot of cool places. I spent 2 months paddling in British Columbia. I've kayaked with orcas in the San Juan Islands, but my favorite place to paddle and my favorite place to be overall is where I've done most of my work as a sea kayak guide and kind of the area I call home now, which is the Apostle Islands. I'm a secondhand joy kind of person, which I think is why guiding overnight trips works for me. I don't seem to get burnt out on them the same way I do with day trips, and I get a lot out of helping other people have a magical experience in the outdoors, facilitating a little bit of that taste of wonder that I so often get to feel myself. This trip, though, I'm not guiding it really. This is a small group of people I've met through guiding, whether I have been their guide or I've met them like through a friend of a friend, and all of them have a fair amount of paddling experience. And I asked if they would be down for some long mileage, some potentially miserable type 2 fun, bring your own food, carry your own gear style camping trip. Prerequisites: some rough water experience, and can you force yourself through a 20 plus mile day and still be in a good mood, carry your own boat, and set up your own gear after. Type 2 fun enthusiast. Personally, I am so deep into type 2 fun that I've forgotten there are other types of fun that are not rooted in suffering, and I'm not sure what that says about me. We all met up at Lost Creek Adventures in Cornucopia to pick up rental boats and then headed to Little Sand Bay on night one. Most of our little crew was driving from the Twin Cities or Madison, so to make the most of our time, we did launch around sunset and paddle out to sand. It's a 3 mile paddle, and a lot tends to happen out in this little crossing, so I definitely recommend either booking a guided tour or taking a sea kayak specific safety course before heading out on Lake Superior. I also normally wouldn't launch this late in the day, and I don't recommend others do so. The sunset launch made sense for us because I guide out here and I know this area really well, but we did end up cooking in the dark. Full disclosure, we did not do a ton of meal planning for this trip and opted as a group for dehydrated food. One thing, though, that I love about girls' trips is everyone packs with everyone in mind, and we ended up with so much extra food because everyone brought stuff to share. This was one of the prettiest mornings I'd had out here in a while, and maybe that was because I wasn't working and could fully sit back and enjoy it, or maybe it was just a really nice morning and I was feeling happy to be alive and out in the wilderness with a group of people who were equally happy to be outside. The sunrise was perfect, the sun in the woods felt like a little fairy tale, and I didn't have to haul any water or cook anyone breakfast, and I think that's beautiful. Our first stop was the Sand Island Sea Caves, which are made from Devil's Island sandstone. Devil's Island sandstone runs in a thin band from Devil's Island through Sand Island at Swallow Point and a second smaller set of caves south of campsites, down to the iconic Myers Beach Sea Caves, which you've probably seen go viral once or twice. Little known to many, there are actually caves and dramatic rock cliffs at the northeast end of most of the islands. Not all of them are Devil's Island sandstone, but the kind of like magic of overnight kayaking in the Apostle Islands is that you can feel like you're discovering these new to you sea caves, little like pocket beaches and that sort of thing all throughout the islands. Personally, I think Sand Island is probably the best island in the Apostle Islands for people looking to see like the most variety, the best caves, lighthouses, camping, and hiking, and especially if you only have one night or a weekend. It's not my favorite island, but it is most visitors' favorite. To head out to some of my favorite spots, you're going to need to head farther out. So Bear Island is objectively my favorite island. It has some of the best beaches probably anywhere ever. They're not pictured. And it has some interesting, really like blocky sea caves, including this one pictured here, and this skylight sea cave that I like to back into. This is probably like this is my favorite sea cave in the park. I think it is super interesting to have the arch with the like open top like this. From the northeast side of Bear Island, you've reached the point where you can decide if you're going to tackle the 2.5 mile crossing to Devil's Island or not, which, no matter how you slice it, is going to add about 6 miles to your overall day, and it's a very exposed crossing to a very exposed island. It's a pretty, like, committing thing to choose. We decided to go for it, and I'm glad that we did because this was the calmest I had ever experienced the Devil's Island Sea Caves. Last year when I made it out here with some friends, it was calm on the west side with just enough bump on the north side that it limited the caves we could get into, and the time before that it was similar but even choppier. The sea caves out on Devils are intricate and go really far back into the island and continue on for a really long time, so you can paddle them for like a large amount of time, which is unique. What does it for me most about this spot, though, is this edge of the world feeling you get looking out of a cave at the glass horizon where the sky meets the edge of the lake and it just kind of smears together. It feels like I've finally found the farthest north I can go before the map stops completely. If you're paddling counterclockwise, there will be a rock shelf after you finish the sea caves where you can hop out and hike up to the lighthouse. It's really only a viable spot to land if it's super, super calm. After this, we crossed over to Rocky Island, where we took like the sketchiest, ugliest little beach landing break on like a boulder field before we finished sending it into our campsite. Our campsite was at the south end of Rocky Island, which is one of my favorite campsites in the Apostle Islands. I cooked everyone quinoa bowls, which is one of my favorite easy, vegan, gluten-free camp meals. I am neither of those things, but I do a lot of camp cooking for people, and I will link all of my favorite recipes below, how to adapt them for car camping, backpacking, and for a variety of dietary needs. Everyone was pretty tired after our 22-mile paddle, So we took a nice beach morning. I got cooked out of my tent pretty much immediately after the sun rose, which was okay because there are certainly worse places to be than sitting on a beach. I spent a lot of the morning alone on the beach watching the birds and just appreciating that I didn't have anything to do or any short videos to watch, and all I had to do was be right there in the sand. And then it started to get hot. There was a chance of severe storms in the forecast that day, and you could just feel it in the air. We were cooking breakfast on the beach, and at one point the water level dropped about a half a foot, which is a pretty sure sign that Lake Superior weather systems are moving through. Here, Ellie's walking out, and you can kind of see like the clouds behind her, and sure enough, a couple hours later, a storm blew through. This is like the tail end of it. It looked pretty dramatic to us, and we were like, sweet, there it was. That was the severe storm. Time to go have a beautiful day. Maybe you can see where this is going. We packed up, headed out to Otter Island, and it was just beautiful, glassy lake, blue skies, and we were all in a great mood. Everyone was so happy to be out in the water. And heading into Oak Island is one of my favorite paddles because Oak Island is so tall with these beautiful deep ravines, and it always reminds me a lot of Jurassic Park. Coming into Oak 6, you're on the north end of the island, and it is one of my favorite campsites. You are looking out at all the northern islands, and it feels like downright tropical. There's this lovely little stream that flows into the bay, dramatic bluffs to the west, and it is just kind of the perfect campsite. The bugs weren't even that bad at all. And the campsite is so perfect, in fact, that one might check the weather real quick and see that there's a 0% chance of rain. Yay! And it is a great night to sleep out on the beach. If this were an episode of Friends, by the way, we would call this the one where Maddie learns the same lesson about the forecast that she should have already learned years ago. So I'm feeling pretty good and confident with my 0% chance of rain. We chill out on the beach. We're watching some really dramatic lightning over the North Shore, which of course, none of which I managed to catch on camera as the sun sets. The North Shore is across the lake by about 60 miles as the crow flies from where we are. At the closest point. At this point, I am unconcerned by this lightning, and I explain so out loud. Lake Superior is huge, thunder echoes across it, and at night you can see storms over 100 miles away. I reckon that the storm we're looking at is probably over the Superior National Forest at this moment, and with the heat of the day fizzling out, the line would likely hit the cool water above Lake Superior and dissipate, hence the 0% chance of rain that I had seen around 8:30. Now, we're all sleeping on the beach. The storm is getting louder, the sky is getting brighter and lighter, and I let it go far, far too long before I finally wake everyone up around 10 p.m. and say, hey guys, we better get tents up. I think that storm is actually going to hit. At which point, duh. It sounds like an approaching freight train. There's a staccato of lightning so frequent that we don't need headlamps to set up camp. So picture the four of us scrambling around to get tents in the right spot and get rain flies on. Me and my friend Ellie, she's the one who's worked as a raft guide, and we're trying to figure out how far up the beach can we drag these boats to avoid whatever the heck is making that noise. So it gets to a point where I see cloud to water lightning not that far offshore from us. I'm like, okay, everyone in tents now, stay on your sleeping pad, don't touch the ground. For the record, there is not that much you can do to truly protect yourself from lightning in the backcountry, but doing something, giving instructions at this point felt better than LOL, see you guys on the other side, because it was feeling pretty intense and I wanted to maintain some semblance of control after I told everyone it would be totally fine to sleep out on the beach. Great idea. Anyways, the storm hits. My big Agnes copper spur, which is new to me, I'd clipped in the rainfly but not at all staked it out in order to move the boats up. I had no footprint underneath it, and it was bowing completely sideways to the point that the poles were touching my head in my crouched little position. It was bone dry in there, which was kind of crazy, so I was pretty happy about that. But for this period of 10 to 15 minutes, we're all in lightning position on our sleeping pads. The wind is ripping. The lightning is so constant that it feels like strobe lights, and I am legitimately convinced that we are going to have lost the boats overnight. I took the videos that you're watching right now after the worst of it had passed, and I felt confident that my phone wasn't going to, invite a lightning strike or something. And it wasn't that long after this that I got up to go assess the damage. Alana's rainfly had blown totally off, and she ended up bunking with me after the storm went through, sharing my sleeping quilt since her bag was totally soaked through. But other than that, there was pretty much no damage, which felt kind of incredible because I was I can't overstate the volume of this storm. It was so loud. I've done quite a bit of camping. I've camped through some gnarly storms. I've been on the water in some gnarly storms. This was top two. There was one on Isle Royal that might have been gnarlier, and I think I just blocked out the memory of it. We woke up in the morning to a small craft advisory, which you may be aware that kayaks are most certainly small craft. I had known that this was coming and planned accordingly, and I am not encouraging people to launch in a small craft advisory, but I am going to walk you through what we did. Everyone here had quite a bit of on-water experience between whitewater and sea kayaking, and so we waited for the winds to die off a little around noon before making a run around Hole in the Wall on Oak Island. Based on the wind direction, I was pretty confident if we could make it around Hole in the Wall, it would be smooth sailing for the 15 or so miles into Bayfield, and this proved to be correct. It was bumpy for the first 15 minutes, then we were in relatively calm water in the lee or the wind shadow of Oak Island. Saw a little bump and a headwind when we were rounding the island, but it was mostly just a little exciting and super controlled. We were in like a good spot to land if needed. And we decided to send it all the way back into Bayfield to end our trip on Saturday night instead of Sunday, so that we had all day Sunday to clean and recover before everyone had to go to work on Monday.